Welcome to Situational Awareness. Today we're going to be talking about how to keep yourself safe in different environments. We're going to be using the material from the United States Concealed Carry Association. I am a certified firearms instructor through the United States Concealed Carry Association. This is not a firearms course. This is based on situational awareness. It is similar to the firearms course, except we're not going to deal with firearms today. We're going to just deal with how to keep you safe, how to keep you out of situations where you would need to use self-defense, including firearms and less lethal options. So what this slide shows is the number of NICS background checks, the FBI background checks conducted on individuals when they are when they're going to be purchasing a firearm. And so a NICS background check is conducted whenever a purchase is made of a firearm through a dealer. Now, there are states such as Maine where private sales are allowed. Those private sales don't have to go through a NICS background check. So this is just the number of firearms purchases going through dealers in states that require it. There are also states that do their own type of background check. Those also do not go through the NICS check. So what I'm saying is this number is low, but what we can see from this trend is that the number of background checks for firearm purchases is going up. Now, the data that we have is a little bit old, but I can tell you this year, the number of NICS background checks has skyrocketed, and you see that little red dot on the screen there for 2005. What that dot represents is Hurricane Katrina, and Hurricane Katrina was a major event back in 2005 that created a situation where people didn't feel safe. They didn't feel safe. They didn't feel like the government was able to protect them. I know some of you are too young to have to remember this, but during Hurricane Katrina, I actually lived in Florida at the time. Hurricane Katrina came up along the Gulf Coast of Florida and impacted the areas of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and also the panhandle of Florida. And during Hurricane Katrina, we had people who were basically stranded by their government. They were on top of their houses without any way of avoiding the floods that were coming through, and as a result of the hurricane. So people started to realize that they needed to be their own line of first defense. So why do people buy guns? We see this in the media all the time. We see the discussion by the mainstream media talking about why people buy guns. And inevitably, the media is going to talk about hunting and target shooting. And in reality, those are the two least reasons why people buy guns. So when asked why people buy guns, the number one answer is for home defense, and the number two answer is personal protection. Now, obviously, personal protection goes right along with home defense. So if you add those two numbers together, 76% of the time, the people are buying their guns to protect themselves either in public or in their home. So, one of the things that I teach in criminal justice, so I'm a professor of criminal justice as well as a firearms instructor. And one of the things that I teach and talk about is the violent crime rate and how violent crime has decreased significantly since 1991. Now, this stat shows from 2006 to 2010. And what it shows is you can see the aggravated assault rate has come down significantly since 2006. So, roughly in the 875,000 range to down to about 725, 730, 730,000 aggravated assaults reported during the year 2010. Obviously, the number of rapes has gone down as well. What we have seen is we've seen robberies stay fairly consistent, and we've actually seen the murder rate fairly consistent in the last few years. Obviously, beyond the 2010 of this slide, we've started to see murder rates and robbery and aggravated assaults start to rise. Now, I'll talk about that in just a minute, but based on this slide, the reason that we go from 2006 is the when gun ownership was loosened, the restrictions were loosened to allow for the purchase of AR-15s, for instance, and so that type of firearm has become very popular in the United States. And what we've seen is since the introduction of those reintroduction of those firearms, because they used to be legal for many years prior to the 1990s, the reintroduction of those firearms have actually shown a decrease in violent crime. And when you look at violent crime versus residential fires, for instance, how many people have a smoke detector in their house? I would say virtually everybody has some form of smoke detector. Most states require it to sell your home now. You must have smoke detectors. And a lot of states require that you have fire extinguishers as well. And the likelihood of you being a victim of violent crime is significantly higher than being the victim of a residential fire. So when we look at these, when you look at these situations and you compare them, why would we be required to have smoke detectors and in some cases fire extinguishers, but we're not allowed to protect ourselves in the case of a violent crime with a firearm or a less lethal option? Well, obviously, if the way I equate the residential fire. So if you look at the smoke detector is basically the same as having your situational awareness. So you have that awareness of what's going on around you, and that is your first indication, just like a smoke detector is your first indication that something's wrong with your with a potential fire in your house. The fire extinguisher is what's used to put that fire out. Now, obviously, a fire extinguisher has limited capability, and so you can only put out a smaller fire with a fire extinguisher, but it's enough to get you out of the house, and that's the goal, to get you out when time is of the essence. You need to get out. The fire extinguisher will help you to get out of that house. I see the same thing with violent crime. The violent crime happens, and if you have a less lethal weapon that you can use, say pepper spray or some sort of a electronic device, something to disable the assailant, then that can give you seconds to get away. And that's really what you need. You need that time to get away. So the fire extinguisher is no different than a less lethal option, or even a firearm in the case of a violent crime. So one of the things that I teach is that everybody should have a personal and home protection plan. It doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be written down, although it's better if it is, because if you write something down, you're much more likely to remember it. You're much more likely to follow it. And if others are in the house with you, or if others are with you wherever you are, and something, a critical incident occurs, then you have that ability, and whoever's with you can be part of that ability to escape that situation. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through how common is violent crime, which we kind of talked about. Why is conflict avoidance so important? Conflict avoidance is, I would say, of utmost importance, because you will never know of how many conflicts you actually avoided. I can tell you that you, in a given year, you avoid conflicts many more times than you would ever know. And so conflict avoidance is one of those things that we're going to talk about, of how do you, as a citizen, avoid a conflict so that a critical incident never occurs. We'll go into situational awareness, which is what this class is based upon. And situational awareness is nothing more than knowing what's going on around you. So, for instance, I'm sitting here in a fairly dark room, but I have lights on toward the front of the room, and this room is fairly secure. It's actually very secure, but it's inside my house. And this room is where I feel the safest at any time when I'm either at home or outside. So if I am not in this room, I'm somewhere else in the house. Somewhere else in the house, there's windows. Okay, I have no windows in this room. There are doors. This room has one door, but it has 6 locks on the door, and it's a steel-plated door. So no one's coming in through that door to get me. One of these videos, I'll actually show you some of the things that I have in this area. But we'll talk about the situational awareness and how that works. The color codes of awareness, this is something, unfortunately, has been adopted by several different agencies of the federal government, and they all use their own different color codes of awareness. When it was first devised, we're going to go through the first derivation of color codes of awareness, because that's what we use. That way, people who learned color codes of awareness are going to be aware of what we're talking about. If I say that situation red, they're going to know immediately that things are about to go really south. Observing our environments. So wherever you are, being able to observe your environments is so important. We're going to talk more on conflict avoidance, and then planning your home defense. So do you live in an apartment? Do you live in a house? Is your house single story? Is it 2 stories? Is it 3 stories? based on the answers to those questions will determine not only what you should do in a critical incident, such as a home invasion or a burglary or a fire. It'll also determine the proper choice of weapon to have to help you. So if it's a fire, it'll be a fire extinguisher. Gun's not going to do you a whole lot of good if you're in your home and you have a fire. The gun isn't going to help you get out. But if you have a home invader in your house who has come there to do you harm, yeah, the fire extinguisher might help. Gun's going to be a lot more effective. But what kind of gun? That depends. So if you tell me that you live in an apartment and there are other units on either side of you, that means you have neighbors that really don't want to get shot through a wall, which bullets will go through walls. And so you need to pick the right tool for the job. Just like if you were screwing in a screw with a screw gun. If you're screwing in a flathead screw with a Phillips head screwdriver, that's not going to work very well. Just the same with a firearm or less lethal option. And then we'll talk about some mental exercises that you can do to help you prepare in case of a critical incident. These are things that you can do right at home while you're watching TV. I'll show you a tool that I use very frequently, and I do it while I'm at home watching TV with the kids and the wife, and it doesn't interfere with any of my personal life. All right, so developing a personal protection plan keeps us physically, legally, financially, and morally safe. Now, what does each one of these mean? So if we're looking to keep us physically, legally, financially, and morally safe, physically makes sense. You have a physical, you have the ability to be physically harmed by an intruder in your house. If you're walking down the street and someone is coming to steal your money, you have the chance of being physically assaulted for them to take your money, up to and including being killed for that money. What does it mean to be legally safe? So when I first started carrying a firearm, I was a police officer, and I started as a police officer as a young gentleman, 20 years old, and at that time I carried a firearm on duty. I did not carry one off duty. Probably not my wisest move, because I did run into situations where that would have been a tool that I could have used in some situations to get me out of bad situations. Now I'm still here, so it all worked out, but it is a tool that could have helped in some situations to apprehend somebody who was looking to do me harm. So what I'm trying to say is that you want to make sure that you are legally safe in whatever you do. And that includes taking classes like this on situational awareness. It also includes, if you decide to carry a firearm, to take firearms classes, because firearms classes are going to help you develop what's called muscle memory. And muscle memory is when you do something repeatedly, you eventually don't have to think about it. So if I were to ask you to pick up a pen, so just pick up a pen. I'm going to pick up a pen right now and write your name. So when I asked you to pick up the pen, I didn't tell you how to pick it up. I didn't tell you how to hold it. to write your name. I just told you to pick up the pen and to write your name. You knew how to do that. You knew how to hold it because you have muscle memory. You've built that up over time, and you are able to pick that pen up and use it functionally to write your name. So that's what being legally prepared means. It means going through what you need to do to prepare yourself legally to defend yourself if necessary in a court of law. So let's move on to financially just for a second. So because financially and legally kind of fit together, what happens if I use a firearm in self-defense and I injure somebody? Do you think that person's going to sue me? I can almost guarantee you, yes. So not only am I going to probably be arrested, but I will also be charged or be served civilly to recover damages for my use of that firearm. Now, there's lots of ways to financially protect yourself. If you're independently wealthy, just have a pot of money set aside for protection. And if you think about it, the last I saw of a self-defense case, I'm thinking specifically of a case down in Florida that was prominent when I lived down in Florida. This was a case fairly widely seen on TV, in the news, but the defendant was found not guilty in court, but was still sued civilly. And that civil suit cost him about $5 million. It was about $3 million in defense attorneys alone, and another $2 million in providing the witnesses that were necessary and the investigation that was necessary on the part of his attorneys to keep him from being financially responsible, which he was found not to be financially responsible for the injuries that resulted. So financially and legally kind of go together. And then morally safe is another strange thing to think about, because it's something we don't necessarily think about, but it's something that as being your own first responder, which is what I'm training you to be, is you need to be your own first responder. When you think about the fact that the police, on average, are about 7 to 11 minutes away in a critical incident. So that means the response time is going to be between 7 and 11 minutes. Almost every critical incident is over and done within that first 7 minutes. So you are going to be your own first responder in most critical incidents. And so how do you keep yourself morally safe? Well, that's by being prepared in advance to do what needs to be done. So if someone comes to me and says, Steve, I don't think that I could use a gun to shoot someone who was attacking me, I say, that's good. That's good that you recognize that. Now let's go through a few scenarios. And I'll ask them, so you said that you don't think that you could use a gun to defend yourself if someone was attacking you. What if someone was attacking your kids? Would you use a gun then? I've had people answer that both yes and no. If they answer yes, okay, so now, do you want to learn how to use a gun in the case that someone is attacking your kids. And so we go through that. And then with the people who say no, I say, that's great. Let's go through developing a personal protection plan that doesn't involve you having a firearm. Because not everybody should have a firearm. It's just not everybody's prepared to use it. If you're not prepared to use it, why would you have it with you? The only thing that's going to do is give your assailant a weapon to use against you. If you're not going to use it anyway, why would you have it with you? So we want to make sure when we're going through training, we want to make sure that whatever it is that you're going to carry, you're going to be willing to use when a critical incident occurs. But the ultimate tool is the avoidance of violent encounters. And how do we avoid violent encounters? That's what we're going to learn over the next couple of slides. So, why is conflict avoidance so important? So, I mentioned that conflict avoidance is something that we prepare for. It's something that we mentally prepare for. It's something that we physically prepare for. But why do we do it? Why is it so important? Well, working as a professor of criminal justice, I can tell you I've seen so many cases of where a prosecuting attorney is not looking out for necessarily for justice, but is looking for conviction. And I don't like to say that because I have lots of friends that are prosecutors. But when you look at how a prosecutor gets their job and keeps their job, it's basically based on they're elected, first of all. In most cases, your district attorney or your prosecuting attorneys are elected. And so how do you get elected? You get elected by having arrest rates and conviction rates. So those arrest rates are done by the police and the conviction is done by you. So if you have 100 arrests in a given year and you only convicted 50% of the people, then the public is not going to look favorably on re-electing you the next time you're up for election if you're only putting away 50% of the people who the police are arresting. Now, I can see both sides of this because you want to have someone that is going to get convictions, but ultimately, as an attorney, your responsibility is to the justice system, to the law, not to prosecution and conviction. So when we're looking at the district attorney or the prosecuting attorney, the reason we look at this is because of the reasonable person test. And the reasonable person test is really what decides in a jury situation. It's what decides whether you go free or if you are going to be held responsible in a civil court or if you are going to be convicted in a criminal court. And I brought up the reasonable person test because the reasonable person test is what the law requires that each individual juror has to look at the totality of the circumstances, the evidence that's been presented, and they have to make a decision: would a reasonable person have acted the same way that I did when I chose to use my firearm in self-defense, would a reasonable person have done that? Well, you can imagine that the 12 people that are on a jury are not going to be necessarily people who carry firearms. They may not be people who have ever carried a firearm. They may not be people who have ever touched a firearm. So, what do you think the likelihood is someone is on that jury is going to be predisposed to thinking that anyone who carries a firearm for self-defense is radical? Well, I think that probably there's going to be a few of those on every jury. So my goal is to insulate myself as much as possible against that reasonable person test, because I know that the average person is not going to have the same reasonableness that I have, and I don't have the same reasonableness, and I'm looking at that as the test, that they have. So what is the reasonable person? Well, it's supposed to be the amalgamation of the people in a given area and what what the average person in that area would have believed would have been reasonable for the conditions that existed at the time. So what it ultimately comes down to is, what can a prosecuting attorney get 12 jurors to believe? Don't count on them being supporters of the Second Amendment. And so you have to protect yourself as much as possible by insulating yourself in protection. We'll talk about what that means a little later. So ultimately, the decision you have to make in a self-defense situation, whether it's again using lethal force or less lethal force, is under the reasonable person test. Is this whatever is I'm facing, is it worth dying over? So if someone is assaulting me to the point where I think I'm going to die, is it worth dying over, or is it worth going to jail over? And I've got to make that decision. Each one of us have to make that decision. So if the answer is no, it's not worth going to jail over, I may choose not to even pull a firearm. In reality, in civilian life, I've never pulled my firearm. Never had to. As a police officer, I did have to in several situations. Never had to shoot anyone, which I'm very glad of. But I've never pulled my firearm as a civilian. So I've never had to make that decision of, is it worth going to jail over? I have had to make that decision in less lethal force situations. So I have been assaulted and stopped the person with less lethal force. One time I can think of specifically was on the streets of Baltimore. Panhandler came up and grabbed me by the shoulder. I stopped him, rendered him inoperable, and without using any lethal force, without brandishing a firearm, because I didn't have it with me, because I was on the streets of Baltimore. And so I was able to stop that situation. Could I have gone to jail over that? Yes. But it would have required a very, very biased jury to pass that reasonable person test in that case. If you are prepared to go to jail for whatever it is that you're facing, That's the question that you're going to have to answer in each individual situation. So that's going to have to be a split-second decision that you're going to have to make. That's why we have to prepare beforehand. So, why is conflict avoidance so important? Because use of force has to be the last resort. Okay? If there's any other way besides using force, that's what we want to use. Conflict avoidance being first and foremost. If we can see that there's an opportunity to escape, definitely something we need to do. So there are basically three possible outcomes when it comes to a violent attack. So you can either avoid that violent attack, escape that violent attack, or defend yourself against the violent attack. Each outcome has one thing in common, and that's that seconds count. So when the conflict avoidance, which I've talked quite a bit about, this is you are actually avoiding a violent encounter, and again, you won't always know that you avoided a violent encounter, but the avoidance of a violent encounter, these are the like 1 to 5 minutes before an actual violent encounter was to ensue. Now that 1 to 5 minutes is because you may have chosen a lighted street to walk down to get back to your car from where you were having dinner, rather than taking the dark alleyway that would have also gotten you there and gotten you there quicker. Now, there's two things to think about there. So the dark alley, it's dark. Where do criminals like to ply their craft or their trade of being criminals? Generally, it's going to be in darker places. Why? Because they won't be seen. And so darkness is a place to avoid. But it would have been quicker. So that's a saving of time. And what you have to do is balance that out. Would the saving of time be worth going down the dark alley versus the time of being out in the light? Generally, being out in the light is going to be your best bet. And so because there's a lot less incidents out in public in lighted areas than you'll find in dark alleys. Escape. So this is when you've identified that there is a dangerous situation at hand, and you need to exit stage left. Get out of there, skedaddle. But you're still in the middle of a bad situation because you have, we talk about 30 seconds. Really, you're between 5 and 30 seconds to get away. And if you're older and you have a tactical shelf like I have down below my chest, that belly will get in your way because I can't run as fast as a lot of perpetrators. So how do I get away? Well, generally it's going to be by the conflict avoidance in the beginning, or to disable them in some way so that I have the time to get away. So it could be pepper spray. It could be tossing a garbage can at them. It could be almost anything to divert their attention long enough for me to get to safety. And so that's where that escape comes in. And then finally is to defend yourself. And we talk about 3 to 5 seconds to make this decision. I can tell you that decision in most cases is going to be snap decision. You've got to decide, is it worth it to defend myself? And again, if you are carrying a firearm to shoot the bad guy, so you've now crossed a significant line where you're going to be second guessed by everybody, including the news media. So, um, if you just think about the fact that whatever you do is going to result in your incarceration, that's the way I look at any type of violent encounter. Is I have the ability to be incarcerated. Now, from again situational awareness, when I look at that, I'm looking at it as I'm not able to be the first defender, the first responder to my family if I'm in jail. So that's a decision that I'm thinking about in this calculus as well. So if I if I do something to protect myself, I'm putting myself in a situation where I'm not going to be able to defend my family for a period of time. So I have to figure that in. Is it worth it? So gaining crucial seconds is what we're going to talk about. And if you look at this lady on the left, now I realize MP3 players are a thing of the past. I still have one, but most of us have our music on our phones now. So it's the phone that's in your hand, and your circle of influence is 6 inches. You're really looking at that phone, which is, I'll pick up my phone and I'll show you. I have to have my phone here so that I can read it. And if I turn it upside right, I can read it better. So literally, this is 6 to 8 inches away from my face. What do you think is going on with my peripheral vision when I have this as my attention 6 to 8 inches away? I'm seeing nothing beyond that. Very little. I might see movement, but am I going to recognize it as a threat? Who knows? So the idea being, if you're out in public, if you're in an area where a critical incident could occur more likely, put the phone down, put it away. You don't need to have it out because it's going to be a distraction that could eventually get you killed. So even without the distraction of the phone, too many people focus no further away than the circle of a few feet. And that limited zone is not where a critical incident is likely to occur. It's likely to occur 30, 40, 50 feet away where you see someone starting to run toward you. And so what are they looking for? They're looking for someone who's on their phone. They're looking for someone who isn't looking around. So if you're the one in the light who is putting your head on a swivel, you're looking around, you're aware of what's going on, you don't have the phone in front of you, you're going to be a lot less likely to be a target than someone who is on their phone or doesn't appear to have a clue what's going on around them. So situational awareness, it's an awareness of the immediate vicinity and people and objects that are in that environment. Now, obviously, we have about 180, 185 degree angle of peripheral vision. That peripheral vision is your yellow zone. That's where you can see, but there still could be threats there. But you can see you've got another 175 to 180 degrees behind you that you can't see anything. And in spite of the fact that I know mothers have a third eye in the back of their head because they see everything that their kids do, that doesn't help you in a critical incident. So what do you do to avoid that? Having your head on the swivel. If you're walking down the street, pretend to look at something in the window of a store. You know, look at that in that window of the store. What do you get when you look in that window of the store? You get another um, at least 90-degree angle that you're going to be able to see of that blind spot. Plus, what else do you get? You get the reflection from the window that's going to give you everything behind you. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about finding opportunities for situational awareness. Finding opportunities to be able to pick up information of what's going on around you that the average person isn't going to see. So, the protective bubble. This came out of Salt Lake City, Lieutenant Tuller. It's called the Tuller Rule, and it initially said that a person who is 21 feet apart, so people that are 21 feet apart, a person who is looking to do you harm can reach you. If you're within 21 feet, they can reach you even if you have a firearm on you. Now, you might get a shot off, and you may injure them, but the likelihood is, let's say they were carrying a knife. The likelihood is you're still going to get stabbed if they're within 21 feet. Now, we've taken that a little bit further. We say that you should really be looking at 32 feet as your safety bubble, because of that. Well, first of all, because not everybody has a 1.5 second ability to draw and fire a firearm at a suspect who is planning you harm. That's pretty quick. So again, this was demonstrated by a police officer who is trained. So we look at 32 feet, which does give you a little bit more time to be able to know what's going on around you and be able to react as the case may be. Now, again, we talked about having 3 to 5 seconds. You're not going to have even 3 seconds, even at the 32 feet. So be prepared to make a decision, like I said, snap. So I talked a minute ago about not acting like a victim. What is the bad guy looking for? The bad guy is looking for the person who isn't paying attention. So being less attractive to criminals, make eye contact with people. So people that are within your bubble, make eye contact with them. Crooks hate eye contact. You'll see them avert their eyes quickly. Anyone that averts their eyes when I look at them, I automatically worry that that person could be a potential threat. I don't worry. I just look at them as a potential threat. So what do? Take minor evasive actions. So step off the line. If you're walking a straight line, just turn to the right. Like I said, stop and look in a window. Take a side street that you weren't planning on taking, as long as it's not a dark alleyway. But if it's a well-lit street with other people around, take that. Be observant of what's going on around you so that you can, again, make a choice that will help you avoid a critical incident. Walking with purpose. So this is one of, again, I'm not the most physically fit guy in the world, but as a 50-something-year-old man, I can walk with purpose. And what that means is that you walk at a pace that's faster than the crowd, and you walk in an upright, erect position. So it looks like you're aware of what's going on. And criminals are not they're looking for the low-hanging fruit. They're looking for that person that isn't aware of what's going on, and the person that's walking slow and probably on their phone, so that, because they know that seconds count, that potential threat knows that seconds count. You should be aware of that as well. Making a game of situational awareness. So this is something that I do quite frequently, and I do it with students. I do it with friends. So we'll go into a Walmart, for instance. Walmart is the social science laboratory environment that is perfect, because every walk of life goes into Walmart. And picking up, like I said, walk with purpose, watch people's hands, watch their eyes, pay close attention to people that walk within your danger zone. But what I do is I try to look for people who are carrying firearms. And so generally, a person who's carrying a firearm isn't going to be the shady individual. So they are going to be more situationally aware, just like you are, just like you should be. So I might be looking for that person as opposed to someone else. And so then what am I looking for? I'm looking for someone who either has a bulge on the right side of their hip, so it shirt untucked, bulge on the right hand side. Why the right hand side? Because the majority of people are right-handed. Obviously, that's not always the case, but that's the majority. So I'm looking for that. I'm looking for any type of, and in Walmart, I mean, I was doing this one night with a buddy of mine, and there's a guy walking around with a thigh holster, with a 45 in the thigh holster, and that was kind of a dead giveaway. Yep, he might have a firearm on him. So it's fun. If you take the time to make this game into having fun, you'll find that there's a lot more people out there who, well, first of all, you'll find there's a lot more people carrying firearms than you ever thought there was. But you're also going to find that there are so many people that are situationally unaware that you could walk right up to them and bump into them before they knew that you were around. So this situational awareness acronym, SIPTE, actually comes from the Motorcycle Shooting Safety Foundation. Motorcycle, not the Motorcycle Shooting Safety, the Motorcycle Safety Foundation. And this was a thing that I learned years ago as a motorcycle safety instructor. And I've adapted it for identifying threats. So basically, scan the area around you continually. You want to have your head on the swivel, like I said, know what's going on around you, identify possible threats. So this is something that as a young law enforcement officer, I learned very early on. It doesn't matter if I'm in a briefing room of other police officers, or if I'm out on the streets at bar closing time. I'm looking for the biggest possible threat to me at any given time. I'm looking for any potential threats, but I'm also identifying that one person that is the biggest threat at any given time. Then I predict the actions or the outcomes of those potential threats. So what is it? What what are the outcomes? What are the things that I need to be prepared for? Are they going to pull a gun? Are they going to pull a knife? Are they just going to come up and strong arm rob me without having a weapon? Um, that would not be a good move on most people's part. And then determine my course of action. So, what am I going to do? What am I going to do in response to that threat? And then execute the plan to eliminate potential threats. So, this is something that I've added again out of another completely different situation. But riding a motorcycle, you have to be situationally aware as well. And so this comes out of that, but I've adapted it to personal life, just walking around. All right, so Jeff Cooper, Colonel Cooper came up with the Cooper standards, the color code of awareness, and what he said was, and you may recognize the dark alley with the bad guy in the black hoodie because all bad guys wear black hoodies. But he is standing behind this wall, obviously recognizing that there's potential people coming at him who he can. I'm not sure what he's looking for. My guess is probably that purse and that the two ladies' right hands. Because first of all, how are they holding those purses? They are clutching them. They're holding them with a hand. They're not around their shoulder. And so that's an easy target for someone who is looking to get away with money quickly. What's the other thing you can see about this couple of ladies? Who are they focused on? They're focused on each other. So they're talking back and forth so he can hear them. So he's using his ability to hear to determine how close they are to the corner of that building. They're focused on each other. They're not even looking in front of them, let alone looking around them. They're just looking at each other as they talk and walk with their purses clutched in one hand. The other thing that I think about here is there's not a whole lot of lighting out there on this street, but it is a lit street. How could they have made this a better situation besides looking forward as they talked and looking around them as they walked, as opposed to looking at each other? I would have moved away from this building. And what does that do? It gains you a few feet of ability to see around that corner at a quicker pace than you'll see when you're that close to the edge of the building, because they're not going to see him until they get up on him, and at that point it's way too late. So condition white is when you're unaware. So this condition white, if you have the ability to relax in your home, that is really the only time you should be in condition white, because that's when you should feel the most protected, the most at ease. Think about this. You sleep in your home, and a bad guy could come in while you're sleeping, and this has happened in my life. And that violation of just knowing that someone came into your home while you were sleeping will almost eliminate any condition white that you ever feel. But condition white is when you should feel you're most secure. If you're in condition yellow, that's when you're aware of your surroundings. So I would say I'm in condition yellow about 95 to 96% of the time that I'm awake. I would say I might hit white 4 to 5% of the time. The rest of the time I'm going to be in condition yellow unless circumstances dictate that I go into a higher level. So I'm keeping my eyes open for potential threats. I'm looking around me. I'm alert. I'm walking faster than the crowd. And this type of situational awareness is just something you will become familiar with, and it will become muscle memory to you, just like picking up that pen does. So, condition orange, you've got a heightened sense of awareness. So something has piqued your interest. You realize something is potentially wrong. So now this is when you're making your plan. So do I avoid at this point? You're almost to the point of not being able to avoid because you know something is going wrong. But you still could avoid here. You could avoid if your threat is, 50 yards away. You can see she's peeking around the corner. If your threat's 50 yards away and you have the ability to turn around and get back in your car and drive off, get back in your car and drive off. That is the easiest avoidance that you could possibly do in this case. But the likelihood is, since your alarm has been triggered, you're probably at a closer position than that, and you may have to start issuing commands. Stay back! Don't come any closer! Whatever it is, verbal commands will throw someone off their game, especially someone who is looking to do you harm. You start issuing commands, they automatically see you as in control. So mentally prepare yourself for the confrontation and a rapid escape if you can, and if not, then prepare to fight. So your action items, so in condition red, again, escape if possible, draw a firearm or and issue commands, and then engage the threat. Now, again, does not have to be a firearm. It could be pepper spray. It could be stun gun. It could be any other less lethal forms of protection. But remember that at this point, your adrenaline is going to be kicking in. So you should be ready to expect that you're going to have a mental block of things going on. Things are going to be in a different order than what you may see them. We'll talk about that in a minute, but expect your hands to tremble because your extremities are they're going to get a lot less blood flow than they would in a normal situation. So you're going to be trembling. One of the things that I do with shooting clients is I'll actually take them out and have them put their hands in a bucket of ice water before they shoot. What does that do? It gives that same simulation of the inability to use your extremities. And think about from a firearm standpoint, if you're not able to use your fingers, that's a really hard thing to overcome with a firearm. So you've got to focus on that and be able to overcome those limitations that you've encountered. All right, so I had talked about the two ladies carrying the purses. This is that blind spot, areas to avoid. You can see the gentleman on the right is walking into the blind spot. Um, Bad guy is right around that corner awaiting the victim. The lady on the left is aware of and avoiding the blind spot by moving herself, 3 to 5 feet away from the edge of that wall. She picks up a much greater distance of being able to see that bad guy behind the corner, which gives her seconds to be able to respond. Some of the other things that you want to look, any type of tall bushes, concrete pillars, vehicles, those all provide some sense of concealment. They don't provide you cover. Well, the concrete pillars would provide you cover. And a vehicle, if you're behind the engine block, could provide cover. But at least you could have concealment, getting away from the sight of the bad guy. So, how do you get away from crowds? So, take the long route with the crowd. Don't take that shortcut through the alley. This is one we talked about in the beginning of the day. You're heading to your car. Don't take the shortcut through the alley. Take the long way in the lighted area where there's other people around. You're going to be much better off having witnesses and other people, because criminals don't like that. And obviously, criminals hang out in alleys, and so we want to avoid those at all costs. All right, so cover, concealment, and exit strategy. I talked about this just a bit ago. But concealment is anything that hides you from the threat. A closed door, a wall, or anything you can duck behind. Cover, like concrete pillars, front of vehicles where the engine block is, can stop an oncoming bullet. And so those are actual cover. Those can provide you with protection. You want to be able to identify opportunities to increase your distance from your potential threat. And you want to be ready, either walking, running, or being able to drive away or to reach cover or concealment. So these are the things that you want to think about as you walk into a building, walk into a room. The first thing you want to do when you walk into a room, look for your potential threats and identify exits. Those exits could be the difference between you being alive or dead. Knowing how to get out of a room. Now, I realize you just walked into it, but what happens if the bad guy comes in behind you? Is there another way out of the room? That's what you want to know. In a parking garage, what's the easiest way, the best way out of a parking garage? Generally, you're going to look for exit signs. So there's obviously safety in numbers. So if you are out in public, if you're with one or more people, as long as you're not the two ladies that were chatting and looking at each other and not paying attention to where they were going, is one of the best things that you can do. We talked about moving faster than the crowd and be a people watcher. I've been a people watcher my whole life. I think watching people is the best thing that you can do for yourself, because again, that eye contact, they don't, bad guys don't like the eye contact. Always be in condition yellow. Never go to a stranger's house alone. So I work with a lot of realtors, and I try to help them understand the situations that they put themselves in. They're going to a house to show a property to someone that they probably don't know, and this may be the first time that they're ever meeting this person. Well, that's not a great situation to put yourself in. So how do you get around that? You could take someone with you. In any means, have some form of protection, either pepper spray or a firearm, to be able to protect yourself if necessary. Um, the last one on the personal security I find funny because when dining out, don't take a seat with your back to the door and know where all the exits are. Well, obviously, that's the knowing where the exits are would have been my first thing. Um, but not sitting with my back to a door. If you go into a restaurant with a bunch of cops, who ends up sitting to the back with their back to the door? Generally, nobody, because they're all going to want to sit with their backs up against a wall. Can't have your back up against a window. Back has to be up against a wall, ideally in a corner so that you can see that full 180 degrees, and behind you, the 180 degrees behind you is covered by walls. Automobile security, this is a little bit tougher, so keep valuables out of sight. Now, by valuables, that means anything of value, which includes if you get one of those nice little badges for work and that's your access badge into work, don't have that hanging from your rearview mirror. That does so many different things because it usually has your name on it. So someone from outside your car can now see who owns that car. It may have your address on it. If you, again, if you used a driver's license or whatever it is on that, it may have your address on it. So now they have your home address. And if they break in and steal that off the window, now they have access to your work as well. So that's one of my pet peeves. Don't hang those things on your rearview mirror. Know where you parked your vehicle and be observant of what's around that vehicle when you park it and when you're leaving. Because if something is different, there's going to be different vehicles if you're at a store, but be aware of what those different vehicles are. Are there people in them? Is there only one person in it? Is the other car running? Those are different things that I would look for as I'm coming up to my vehicle to get into it. If you have young children that you're helping to buckle into a car seat, that is a prime time for a bad guy to strike because you are totally not aware of what's going on around you. Be aware. Okay? Don't focus all your attention on that child. Yes, that is the most important thing in your life, so keep them alive. Be aware of what's going on around you while you're buckling them into their seat. Be a courteous driver. Don't tailgate people. If they tailgate you, don't slam on your brakes. And don't use the middle finger. You don't want to mess with people. You don't want to create anything that is going to be an issue for them. Anything that they could use to create a stressor on the other person, because they may not have been a bad guy, but if you slam on your brakes in front of them because they were tailgating you, they might all of a sudden turn into a bad guy. So just be calm, pull up your big boy pants, and drive on just like nothing had happened. And then finally, if you are an offender bender, stay in your car. Call the police and let them know of the situation. When the police arrive, get out of your car. Because there's too many of the opportunists out there who are creating accidents. And when they create the accident, the reason is to get you out of your vehicle so that either a buddy can come jump in your vehicle and steal it, or they can rob you while you're there and get away before the police arrive. So stay in your vehicle. If you can, keep your vehicle running, and make sure that the police arrive before you get out. So keep your doors locked and the garage door closed even when you're at home. So don't leave your garage door open. That gives access generally. If you have an attached garage, it gives access to your house that people don't even think about. Leave interior lights on around in your house. People say that by having light on, you're giving the burglar the ability to see. No, the burglar comes with a flashlight. They have the ability. They're going to be able to see. I want to be able to see when I wake up at 2 a.m. and that burglar is in my house. I want to be able to see because I've been asleep, and I want to be able to see what is going on. I want to not stumble over stuff that was left in the hallway when I come out of my bedroom. So leave lights on. Burglars do not like lights because they don't want to be seen. Get an alarm system. Put something up to protect yourself. Get a dog. Dogs are one of the best protection to keep away burglars. Why? Dogs bark. It doesn't have to be an attack dog, just a dog that barks. And they're going to bark at the first sign of an intruder. Phone security. I could go in. I do a whole class in identity theft, so I won't go into this a whole lot. But if you don't know whoever's calling you, don't answer the phone. If you do answer the phone, hang up quickly. It just makes no sense to talk to people who are not out for your best interest. Home security is something that we'll talk about. I talk to students a lot, being a college professor, and students in self-defense is a whole nother ball game, because you're living at a place where you're not familiar with your surroundings generally, and by not being familiar, situational awareness is always at a minimum, and you need the ability to become aware of your situation. Generally, you're not going to be able to have a handgun for self-defense because a lot of schools don't allow them. So you have to be prepared in other ways, and the biggest one is situational awareness. So know what's around you. Keep your condition white to a minimum, and just be aware of where you are and what's around you. So I talked about mental exercises earlier, and this is obviously me sitting in my easy chair with my sport jacket on, because that's how I sit at home. And I'm just joking, but I do sit and do mental exercises while I'm at home. So this time when you're at home is a time when you can be in condition white, or more likely in condition yellow. And so what do you do while you're at home for mental exercises? You think about different scenarios. What could someone do to invade my space where here I am at home. And it could be someone breaking in your front door. If you don't lock your front doors, it could be just someone walking in your front door because you didn't have it locked in the first place. By the way, the number one entry point for burglars is the front door. It's not a back door, it's not a window, it's the front door. So keep your doors locked, and be prepared for critical incidents. So one of the things that I do, and again, I'll show you this tool. This is a CERT pistol, which I have to hold it in front of my face because otherwise you can't see it. The CERT pistol is shot indicating reset trigger, and what it has is a laser inside, and the laser just gives you feedback as to where you're hitting, the types of shots that you're getting off. And so what I do is I just, while I'm at home, I'll sit and I will first of all get a good grip on the gun so that I'm used to holding my gun at all times. So notice thumbs are facing forward. I have my right hand, because I'm right-handed, on the gun, and then my left hand fills that gap right around. And you can't see this, but I actually have a target up in front of me that I can sit and practice my shots. Now, that practice also, that feedback of the laser also gives me, because I do have a target on directly in front of me, gives me the feedback of, am I pushing my trigger, am I pulling my trigger, or am I pressing back perfectly and the laser is steady on that paper. These are things that I do while I'm at home, again, just as a means of being prepared. Not that I anticipate that anyone's going to break into my house, but if they did, I would be prepared. But I'm more thinking about things that could happen when I'm away from home. Now, from the standpoint of being at home, the next slide is actually a home preparedness checklist. And it's something that if you come through one of my classes, you'll get this home checklist. That's the last slide in this presentation, but I wanted to make you aware of it, that is something that we would go through in a class where you would we would sit down and say, do you live on the first floor? Are you living in an apartment? Do you have a 3-story house? Do you have a basement? Do you have a safe room in your house? This type of thing, so that we can actually make this plan specifically for you and your family. And I do mean that these plans are not just for you. These are for everyone that lives in your household, because if there's one person that doesn't know what's going on in the case of a critical incident, then that's your weakest link. And who's going to protect that one person? Well, that's going to have to be one of the others. So if everyone knows what to do in the case of a critical incident in your home, then you can be prepared to do what you're supposed to do, which is protecting them, because they all know where they're supposed to be, and you, as the sheepdog, can be that protector of them. So you know where they are, you protect that one position, and you're not scanning your house for bad guys, you're not doing any of that. You're protecting that one position, which is your family. So if you go on to that mental exercise checklist, this will help you to pick up those opportunities. This is where we gain seconds. We talked about that in the beginning of this session. This is where you gain seconds. So I hope this has helped you. If you do want to participate in one of our in-person classes, please feel free to reach out. Again, my name is Steve Dyer, and I operate CCWMaine, and CCWMaine's been around. I've been teaching firearms training since the late 80s, and so yes, I know I look pretty good for 100 years old, but I've been teaching this stuff for a long time. Situational awareness is the most important part of it, and creating these mental exercises is the one thing that everybody can do without ever having to leave their home. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to hearing from you if you would like to take a class.